On a quiet morning, the streets fill without instruction. No flyers, no announcements. People simply come officers, veterans, families, strangers standing in silence as a small procession moves forward. A flag-draped casket passes by, too small for a human, heavy enough to break every heart. Inside is not just a dog, but a partner, a protector, a life that never asked why, only when. For years, these canines ran toward danger so others could step back. They searched dark roads and distant deserts, trusted a single voice, and stood between gunfire and the people they loved. Some were taken by explosions, some by speeding cars, some while protecting one final time. When they fell, entire communities felt the loss. If their loyalty matters to you, please subscribe. Help us remember the heroes who served without hesitation and loved without condition. Morning arrived in Denver with a thin, restless wind sliding down from the Rockies, carrying the smell of cold steel, distant snow, and a city that never quite learned how to be quiet. Ethan Brooks stepped out of Union Station just after dawn, a tall, broad-shouldered man in his late 30s, moving with the controlled economy of someone who had spent most of his adult life learning how not to be noticed. His frame was still powerfully athletic, though softened by time and injuries that never fully healed. A faint limp tugged at his right leg when he walked too long, the legacy of a blast in Helmand Province that had ended his last deployment with the Navy SEALs. His face was angular, weathered by sun and desert wind, with a closely trimmed dark beard that hid a scar running from the corner of his mouth toward his jawline. His eyes, gray steady and habitually alert, scanned crowds without judgment, not suspicious but prepared. Ethan was polite with strangers, distant with acquaintances, and deeply uncomfortable with gratitude. Years of watching men die quietly had taught him that praise was fragile, and memory even more so. At his left side walked Rex, a 9-year-old German shepherd whose presence changed the air around them. Rex was large even for his breed, with a thick sable coat streaked with black along the spine and a graying muzzle that hinted at age without weakening his authority. His ears stood alert but relaxed, his amber eyes constantly reading the world for patterns Ethan no longer consciously noticed. The dog's gait was smooth, disciplined, and slightly protective, placing himself half a step ahead whenever strangers passed too close. Rex bore the invisible weight of service, as clearly as Ethan did, his left flank still sensitive where shrapnel had once lodged, his reactions slower but deliberate. He was calm with civilians, patient with children, indifferent to noise, and unshakably devoted to the man beside him. If Ethan was cautious with the world, Rex was quietly confident in it, so long as Ethan remained within reach. Denver was not home in the way childhood places pretended to be, but it was where Ethan had been born, where his father, a former Air Force mechanic, had taught him how to fix engines and never complain. Returning felt less like reunion and more like negotiation. The city had grown upward and outward while Ethan had been gone, glass towers rising where old brick warehouses once stood. He felt no resentment toward it, only the faint disorientation of a man stepping into a photograph taken years after he'd left. Their destination was a modest townhouse near Washington Park, a place arranged through a veterans housing program run by Sarah Collins. Sarah had met Ethan only once before over a video call filled with awkward pauses. In person, she was in her early 30s, tall and slender without being fragile, with sun-warmed fair skin and auburn hair usually pulled into a loose, practical bun that resisted order as much as she did. Her green eyes were observant but kind, framed by the faint lines of someone who smiled often and worried constantly. Sarah dressed simply, jeans, wool sweaters, sturdy boots favoring comfort over presentation. She spoke softly but with a firmness that came from years of advocating for people who hated asking for help. A former Army social worker, she had left active service after losing 2 close friends in the same year, a grief that sharpened her empathy and made her stubborn about follow-through. Sarah greeted them at the door with a smile that didn't try to fix anything. She crouched briefly to let Rex sniff her hand, noting his age and posture with professional respect rather than curiosity. "You can take the back room," she told Ethan. "It's quieter, less foot traffic." Ethan nodded, grateful she hadn't asked if quiet was what he wanted. He rarely knew the answer himself. That night, as wind rattled the windows and city lights pulsed faintly through the curtains, Ethan lay awake on the narrow bed, listening to Rex breathe steadily on the floor beside him. The dog's presence anchored him as it always had. Ethan wondered, not for the first time, who he would be without the routines of war, without missions that told him exactly where to stand and what to protect. Rex lifted his head once, sensing the shift in Ethan's breathing, and placed his chin back down with a quiet huff, as if to say the question could wait. Outside, Denver kept moving. Inside, a man and a dog began the slower work of learning how to stay. 2 weeks after Ethan Brooks settled into the quiet rhythm of Denver mornings, the city tested whether peace was something he could keep. The days had begun to form a pattern, early walks with Rex through Washington Park while frost still clung to the grass. Coffee brewed 2 strong short conversations with Sarah Collins that never pushed past what was necessary. Ethan was polite, reserved, and unfailingly reliable about small tasks, fixing a broken gate, replacing a light, carrying boxes without comment. Beneath that calm, his mind remained coiled alert, waiting for a purpose he no longer had permission to claim. Rex sensed the tension long before Ethan admitted it to himself. The German Shepherd had grown used to civilian life quickly on the surface, yet his body never fully relaxed. At 9 years old, Rex still carried himself with disciplined precision, his thick sable coat catching the Colorado light, his graying muzzle lending him an almost solemn dignity. He slept lightly, ears twitching at distant sirens, positioning himself instinctively between Ethan and any unfamiliar sound. When Ethan stood still too long, lost in thought, Rex would nudge his knee with quiet insistence, grounding him in the present. Sarah noticed these moments. She was careful not to comment directly, but her eyes, sharp, empathetic, missed little. Sarah moved through her workdays with practiced steadiness, her tall, lean frame always in motion, clipboard tucked under one arm, auburn hair escaping its tie by mid-afternoon. Years in uniform had shaped her posture and her patience. Losing friends during her Army service had left her with a calm urgency, a belief that waiting too long often cost more than acting too soon. She respected Ethan's boundaries, but she did not mistake silence for healing. The call came on a Wednesday evening, just as the sun dipped behind the Front Range and shadows stretched long across the park. Sarah answered first. The man on the other end introduced himself as Officer Mark Delaney, a Denver Police Patrol sergeant in his early 40s. Delaney had a square, weather-beaten face, thinning brown hair, and the kind of voice shaped by years of giving instructions over chaos. He spoke plainly without drama, but there was strain beneath his professionalism. A child had gone missing near an abandoned industrial corridor north of the river, an area riddled with closed factories and half-collapsed warehouses. Patrol units were searching, but night was coming fast and resources were stretched thin. Sarah listened, her expression tightening. When she glanced toward Ethan, he already knew. He hadn't heard the details, but something in the way Rex had risen to his feet, ears forward, told him enough. Sarah hesitated only once before asking the question she technically wasn't allowed to ask. "There's a retired K-9 with him," she said carefully. "And a handler." The line went quiet for a beat. Delaney exhaled slowly. "Off the record," he said. "If they're willing." Ethan didn't speak at first. He crouched to Rex's level, resting a hand against the dog's broad chest, feeling the steady strength there. Memories surfaced, uninvited night searches under foreign skies, the weight of responsibility, the cost of getting it wrong. He had promised himself he was done, but he also knew what it felt like to be the one who arrived too late. Rex met his gaze, amber eyes calm, certain, waiting not for permission, but for partnership. They arrived at the edge of the search zone just after dark. Police lights washed the rusted buildings in red and blue, turning broken windows into fractured mirrors. Delaney met them near a taped-off access road, his posture stiffening briefly at the sight of Rex before relaxing into cautious hope. He took in Ethan's bearing, the controlled movements, the quiet focus, and nodded once. No speeches were needed. The air was sharp with oil-old metal and damp concrete. Ethan adjusted Rex's harness, his hands steady despite the familiar surge of adrenaline. Rex lowered his head immediately, nostrils flaring as he worked, moving with deliberate intent along the cracked pavement. This was different from war, Ethan reminded himself. No enemies, no explosives, but the responsibility felt the same. A life depended on getting it right. As they moved deeper between the warehouses, the city noise faded, replaced by the distant hum of traffic and the soft rhythm of Rex's breathing. Ethan followed without questioning, trusting instincts forged over years neither of them could fully leave behind. Somewhere ahead, unseen and unheard, a child waited. And in that moment, Ethan understood that coming home had never meant stopping. It had only meant choosing once again what and who he was willing to stand for. Night settled fully over the industrial corridor, the kind of darkness that pressed inward, and made every sound feel closer than it was, and Ethan Brooks felt the familiar narrowing of focus as Rex paused, angled his head, and shifted direction with sudden certainty. The German Shepherd's body language changed in a way Ethan knew by heart, spine-aligned tail, low but steady nose, working the cold air with disciplined urgency. This was not confusion. This was a decision. Ethan followed without question, boots crunching softly over gravel as they moved east between two warehouses, whose corrugated walls bore decades of rust and faded warning signs. The smell here was different. Old oil-wet concrete, something faintly sweet that didn't belong, and Rex tracked it with care, favoring his injured flank but refusing to slow. At 9, Rex no longer sprinted into tasks, yet his resolve had sharpened with age. Every step now carried intention. Officer Mark Delaney stayed back, coordinating radios and perimeter lights, trusting Ethan to read the dog the way a man reads a map he once memorized under fire. Delaney's shoulders were squared against the cold, his jaw tight beneath a dazed stubble eyes, alert but respectful. He had learned long ago that good help didn't announce itself. Sarah Collins stood with him near the access road, arms folded against the wind, auburn hair loose now and brushing her collar. She looked taller in the harsh lights, her lean frame braced, green eyes fixed on the narrow path Ethan and Rex were taking. Sarah had seen enough searches end badly to know when hope was fragile and when it was dangerous to abandon. The scent led them to a drainage culvert half hidden by weeds and collapsed fencing. Rex slowed, sniffed the air, then the ground, then the concrete edge, his ears angling back toward Ethan as if asking for confirmation. Ethan knelt, running a gloved hand along the culvert's rim, feeling the cold dampness seep through. He spoke softly, not commands, just presence, and Rex continued lowering himself to peer into the darkness. A faint sound came then, so small it might have been imagined, a thin, uneven sob followed by the scrape of movement. Ethan's chest tightened. He raised a hand once, a signal Delaney couldn't see, but Rex understood, and the dog eased forward, careful, controlled. Inside the culvert they found Lily Parker, 8 years old, curled against the concrete in an oversized pink jacket smeared with dirt. She was small for her age, with pale skin gone gray from cold, straight blonde hair tangled and damp against her cheeks. Her eyes were wide-rimmed red and too tired to be afraid anymore. When Rex's head appeared, filling the narrow space with warm breath and steady eyes, Lily flinched once, then reached out instinctively, fingers curling into the thick fur at his neck. Rex did not move. He lowered himself further, becoming solid, becoming safe. Ethan slid closer, speaking gently, his voice calm and even, the way he had once spoken to men bleeding in the sand. Lily clung to Rex as if he had always belonged there. Extraction was slow and careful. Lily's ankle was swollen, likely twisted during her fall, and Ethan lifted her with measured strength, keeping Rex close so she wouldn't panic. When they emerged into the lights, Sarah moved first, kneeling beside Lily with practiced assurance, her voice low and warm, her hands steady as she checked circulation and wrapped the child in a thermal blanket. Delaney radioed for medical support relief, softening his expression without erasing the gravity of what might have been lost. As paramedics arrived, Lily refused to let go of Rex. The dog stood patiently, sides rising and falling, eyes half-lidded, content to be exactly where he was needed. Ethan watched something loosening in his chest that he hadn't known was locked. He felt pride, yes, but also a sharper ache, the knowledge that moments like this were the reason he could never fully step away. Rex had not saved Lily because of training alone. He had stayed because staying was who he was. Later, as the lights dimmed and the crowd thinned, Ethan walked Rex back toward the car. The dog moved slower now, the strain catching up to him, and Ethan adjusted his pace without thinking. Sarah approached, her face tired but bright with contained relief. She said nothing unnecessary, only nodded once, as if acknowledging a truth neither of them needed to name. Ethan scratched Rex behind the ears, feeling the warmth there, and understood that tonight had redrawn the lines of his life. He had come home believing he was finished. Instead, he had been reminded that purpose sometimes returns quietly on 4 paws, leading you east into the dark and back again. Morning broke gray and windless over Denver, and Ethan Brooks knew something was wrong before Rex failed to rise. The German Shepherd lay on his side near the door, breath, shallow amber eyes tracking Ethan with effort rather than ease, the gray at his muzzle, more pronounced than it had been the night before. Ethan knelt, palm steady, heart not. Rex tried to stand, failed, and settled again with a low huff that sounded like apology. The rescue had cost him more than fatigue. Ethan felt the old instinct surge, assess, act, fix, But this wasn't a problem he could outwork. He lifted Rex carefully into the truck, the weight familiar, yet suddenly heavier, and drove to a veterinary clinic Sarah had recommended, without saying why she knew it so well. The clinic smelled of antiseptic and warm fur, and Dr. Hannah Morales met them at the door, a woman in her late 40s with cropped salt and pepper hair, olive skin, and eyes that carried both precision and kindness. She wore her authority lightly speaking with calm clarity shaped by decades of making hard truths survivable. Hannah moved Rex with practiced gentleness, noting the stiffness in his hind leg, the tremor beneath his ribs, the way his ears flicked but didn't fully lift. He pushed past his limits, she said not unkindly. Adrenaline can hide a lot. Age doesn't. Tests followed quiet, efficient, and the verdict arrived without drama. Chronic pain flaring, internal bruising, a heart that had given more than it had left to give. Rest medication and no more nights like the last one. Ethan nodded as if accepting orders, though this one stripped him bare. Sarah arrived midway through tall and composed, despite the worry she didn't bother to hide auburn hair escaping its tie, green eyes softening when Rex managed a weak wag at her voice. She stood close without crowding her presence and Anchor saying little because she knew words would land wrong. When they brought Rex home, the day unfolded slowly. The house rearranged around a dog who had always rearranged himself around Ethan. Rex slept near the window now, sunlight warming his coat chest, rising and falling with effort. Ethan sat on the floor beside him, hand resting on that broad shoulder, counting breaths like he once counted steps on patrol. The phone rang in the afternoon. Officer Mark Delaney voice measured, gratitude restrained. The department wanted to recognize the rescue, maybe formalize a volunteer role. Ethan thanked him and declined gently but firmly. After the call, Sarah watched Ethan's jaw tighten, the scar along it pulling as memory pressed close. She spoke then, careful but direct. "This doesn't mean stopping," she said. "It means choosing what doesn't take everything." The words landed because they didn't pretend. Evening brought a knock at the door and a small hesitant figure, Lily Parker's mother, Emily Parker, early 30s, pale with exhaustion. Brown hair pulled back in a hurried knot, eyes red but resolute. She held a paper bag in gratitude she didn't know how to shape. Emily spoke quickly, thanking, apologizing for intruding, explaining she needed Rex to know, needed Ethan to know that a life had been returned intact. She knelt by Rex, careful tears falling onto the fur as she whispered thanks meant for anyone listening. Rex stirred tail tapping once enough. When Emily left the house, felt fuller and quieter at the same time. Night came, and with it a decision Ethan had been avoiding. He sat with Rex, voice low, telling him stories from deployments the dog had already lived, promising rest without abandonment. Rex listened, eyes steady, trust unbroken. Ethan understood then that service had changed shape, not vanished. The work ahead would be smaller, slower, and harder in a different way, learning how to protect what remained rather than chase what was lost. He lay on the floor beside Rex until sleep took them both, the city outside moving on, the choice inside finally made. Spring arrived in Denver without ceremony, warming the mornings just enough to soften the edges of memory, and Ethan Brooks learned that healing often looked like ordinary days done well. Rex recovered slowly, the way old warriors do, trading speed for wisdom. His coat regained its sheen, sable fur, catching sunlight as he lay on the porch, amber eyes following birds with thoughtful restraint rather than chase. At 9, Rex moved carefully now, rising with deliberation, accepting help with a dignity that never felt like surrender. Ethan adjusted his life around that pace, discovering that attention itself could be a form of service. He rose early to prepare Rex's medication-measured walks that favored grass and shade and long afternoons where the world was allowed to pass without demanding anything in return. The house grew into itself, bowls where they belonged, leashes hung with intention, quiet corners reclaimed for rest. Sarah Collins became a steady presence, no longer just a case manager, but a friend who understood the language of pauses. Tall and lean auburn hair, often loose now, she brought practical kindness in the form of groceries and firm suggestions, her green eyes bright with a confidence earned from choosing care over control. She spoke to Ethan as an equal, teasing him lightly when he tried to refuse help, reminding him that independence did not require isolation. The city noticed too. Officer Mark Delaney stopped by once with coffee and an update respectful of boundaries, grateful without pressure. Word spread in the small way good things do, and soon a proposal arrived, not from the department, but from a community center near Washington Park run by Thomas Reed, a retired firefighter in his late 50s, with a broad-framed silver beard and a laugh worn smooth by smoke and loss. Reed had lost his hearing in one ear years back and gained a patience that came from understanding limits. He wanted Ethan and Rex to visit once a week, nothing formal, just to sit with kids and veterans to let presence do the work words couldn't. Ethan hesitated, then said yes. On one condition, Rex would set the schedule. The first visit was quiet. Children approached carefully, eyes, curious hands, tentative, while Rex lay calmly breathing, steady, inviting touch without demanding it. Ethan spoke little, answering questions honestly, offering no heroics. He watched as shoulders dropped and smiles appeared as if the room remembered how to exhale. Lily Parker came once with her mother Emily, now steadier gratitude transformed into a warm familiarity. Lily sat beside Rex and read aloud, her voice, stronger confidence returning line by line. Rex listened, tail-tapping in time, content to be exactly where he was useful. Weeks passed, and the work settled into a rhythm that felt right. Ethan learned to teach without commanding, to protect without chasing danger. He found joy in small markers, Rex choosing the sunny spot. Sarah laughing at his stubbornness, Reed's nod of approval when a room grew lighter. One evening after a long walk beneath budding trees, Ethan stopped at the park overlook. The city stretched below, alive and ordinary. He knelt beside Rex, hand warm against fur, and understood that purpose hadn't left him. It had changed address. Sarah joined them. Her posture relaxed, the wind lifting loose strands of hair as she spoke about plans for summer programs and the quiet pride she felt watching Ethan choose this life. He listened, truly listened, and felt the future open, not as a mission, but as a place. They walked home together, three figures moving at a shared pace, and for the first time since coming back, Ethan did not count steps or exits. He simply stayed. Sometimes the miracle is not the moment someone is saved, but the quiet strength that arrives afterward. God does not always stop the storm. Sometimes he sends a companion strong enough to walk beside us through it, a loyal dog, a faithful heart, a second chance disguised as an ordinary day. In our daily lives, we may never face a battlefield or a rescue in the dark, but we all carry wounds, losses, and responsibilities that feel heavy. This story reminds us that love, loyalty, and purpose are gifts from God, often revealed through the simplest acts, staying caring, choosing kindness when no one is watching. If this story touched your heart, let it be a reminder that you are not walking alone. May God bless you, protect your loved ones, and guide you through every season, both the hard ones and the hopeful ones. If you believe in small miracles and second chances and in love that endures, please share this story with someone who may need it today. Leave a comment to let us know where you are watching from and what this story meant to you. Subscribe to the channel to support more stories of faith, courage, and compassion. And may God's peace be with you and your family today and always.